the purpose of Death Cafe is to understand that our lives are finite and we're not going to be around forever. So being in touch with the fact that we are going to die at some point will make us appreciate more of life. And a lot of people, we always encourage the hosts to present our guidelines at the beginning, and remembering that our lives are finite is one of them.
Welcome to Zestful Aging, where I talk with fascinating, talented, and inspiring guests who reflect on the adventures and challenges of aging and who are living their lives with vibrance and purpose. I'm your host, Nicole Christina, psychotherapist, writer, and fellow Zestful Ager. I want to invite you to my brand new free webinar, Zestful Aging. Here's how you do it. Many of my clients tell me that they're stretched too thin with too many demands upon them. They are just worn out. In my brand new webinar, I teach simple and sensible habits that will significantly improve your life now and help you age with vibrance and resilience. But it's important to start now. Don't wait until your body's distress signals go from a whisper to a scream. If you've followed me at all, you know I'm not about restrictive diets or boot camps. I believe life can be challenging enough. Let's appreciate our bodies and minds for the miraculous systems they are and take the time to take care of ourselves. Self-care pays big dividends now and in the future. And being well ourselves is the only way we can help those we love. And if you sign up now, I will send you my super Zestful Aging checklist, which I designed so you have clear guidelines right at your fingertips. The webinar is free. You can sign up at NicoleChristina.com. And as always, I appreciate your feedback. Today we are speaking with Jools Barsky from Death Cafe. She's the sister of John Underwood, who co-founded the Death Cafe and died an untimely death himself. Death cafes have spread quickly across Europe, North America, and the world. As of today, they are offered in 63 countries. Rather than being morbid, Jools describes a death cafe as a safe place to talk about a taboo subject. And now I'd like to introduce Jools Barsky of the Death Cafe movement. Welcome to the show, Jools.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell our listeners just a little bit about the story, how Death Cafe came to be?
Sure. So it was created by my brother, John Underwood, in London in 2011. He previously worked for Tower Hamlets Council, which is a district in London, doing something completely unrelated. And because of his Buddhist studies, he started to be really interested in death and dying, and the finiteness of our lives. So John created an environment where people could come together to discuss death and dying in a safe environment with tea and cake.
Tea and cake.
Mm-hmm.
And how was it received? Were people initially a little put off, or did it feel like people had been kind of waiting for an invitation like this one?
A bit of a mixed bag, really. So the first few people that came to Death Cafe were people that knew John already and knew that he was quite quirky. But we've had quite a few people who, they really embrace it. We've got people who are in the death and dying industry already who kind of are used to that immersiveness. And then there are some people who are interested in attending because they kind of have this morbid, even just a kind of sense of a morbid curiosity. And then there are some people who think that it's kind of some sort of a cult. The name Death Cafe, I think, put some people off, but we were very conscious that we wanted to make it, we wanted to be true to the fact that, we are discussing death and dying. We're not discussing anything. We're not kind of skirting around the houses. We're really getting down to the core subject.
So it sounds like you're saying that people come with different agendas. Everyone is interested in death, but maybe for different reasons.
Yeah, that's true. I think we have to be careful with the word agenda because the Death Cafe guidelines state that there will be no agenda at a Death Cafe. So just to kind of sidestep that a little bit, they have different purposes, I suppose, for attending. So we suggest that Death Cafe isn't attended by those people who are in the white hot heat of grief. Purely because it might be a little bit too much for them to discuss death at this time. And there are some people who've never been bereaved, or maybe they have thanatophobia, i.e. they are scared of their own death. And some people who are, just kind of bystanders and don't necessarily contribute an awful lot to the conversation, but just want to start that thinking maybe in their mind.
I see. So there's definitely parameters
Mm-hmm.
in which this is a place to discuss death and dying, but you have to be in a particular mindset, perhaps.
Yeah,
Is that right?
yeah. I mean, I think there are some people who have been personally, they're dying, who have attended Death Cafe. In fact, one of the first attendees that attended John's, she was kind of in the final stages of cancer, and I think died maybe 6 months or so afterwards. But because we're not a support group or a bereavement group, sometimes I think that the lines can be crossed a little bit too much, and we don't want to make other participants feel uncomfortable, but equally it needs to be a safe environment for that person. And we ensure that our facilitators and our hosts are they have the places where they can signpost people to where they need to go, but then they're not always qualified to provide them with support that they might need at difficult times in their lives.
I see. So just really clear about the limits, I think,
Yeah.
of what you offer, that it's a safe place and there are
Mm-hmm.
resources that people can be referred to, but that's not the function.
Precisely, yes.
I see. And how does the tea and cake figure into this?
um, so the idea behind the tea and cake is that it is something really nourishing, and John described it as being a little bit naughty, like a midnight feast, because you're discussing this really taboo subject, but you're doing it with something really fulfilling and enjoyable. So putting your hands around a nice warm cup of tea, that can just make you feel, comfortable and comforted.
Sure. And do these go on at different cafes, actual cafes that are established in town and they've invited you in? Or how does this work in terms of where do you show up?
So we have different hosts decide to host to hold their death cafes in different places. So John's initial death cafe that took place in his dining room in his home in Hackney in London, and some places some people go to a coffee shop and hold it there. There's a death cafe in New York that go to a Moroccan restaurant, so they don't have the original tea and cake, but they have lovely Moroccan food. I held one in Santa Barbara in a vegan cafe, so we had vegan cakes and sandwiches. It really varies, And I had somebody recently say that they wanted to host a death cafe, but they didn't want to have tea and cake. They wanted to go to a health food place and have kombucha and like spirulina balls.
I see. And what do people say is their experience of doing this, of speaking about death, of asking and sharing some of these thoughts and maybe concerns? How do they describe the experience?
Again, that really varies. Some people most people come out and they really enjoyed it. the only times when I've in fact heard reports of people not enjoying it is if there's been something wrong with the logistics of, where it's been held. But, there are reports of there being a lot of laughter and just kind of, the purpose of Death Cafe is to understand that our lives are finite and we're not going to be around forever. So being in touch with the fact that we are going to die at some point will make us appreciate more of life. And a lot of people, we always encourage the hosts to present our guidelines at the beginning, and remembering that our lives are finite is one of them. So I think that that's probably at the back of people's minds when they're having these conversations, and the general feedback that we get is that people, that objective is fulfilled.
I'm wondering whether the environment has, because we've gone into this cultural aspect of pretending we're not going to die, and if we have enough vitamins and omegas and kubacha, we won't die. I wonder if that's what made this really needed. If we had been, as a culture, as a society, as a Western society, more clear, bringing the bodies, seeing the bodies, interacting with the bodies, that maybe we wouldn't need a death cafe as much. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I heard something about that recently, about the fact that previously people would be faced with their dead. That would be part of their ritual of day-to-day life. And you'd see bodies going down the streets, and 200 odd years ago that would be kind of normal practice, whereas it's all very much hidden from us now in hospitals and what have you. So yeah, I think because people are so much in denial of the fact that that they are going to die, that's probably where it came from. And in Buddhism, there is Buddhists are encouraged to meditate every day on the fact that they're going to die and the dying process. And so that, that's very much in their consciousness. So I suppose there's an element of, people hiding from it and going through the kind of goji berry kombucha festival, and just kind of culture. And, we're kept very busy nowadays, aren't we? And our lives are about hoarding things and getting more, everybody wants to accumulate. And the more things we have around us, and the more high tech we are, the more kind of in control we feel. And that's essentially to get away from the fact that we're not in control of the fact that we're going to die at some point. That's going to stop.
So there's this philosophy about it. There's maybe a spiritual aspect, but this became very personal for you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Is this in relation to John?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So, John very suddenly died in 2017, so around 18 months ago. It was very unexpected. He had a rare form of leukemia and a brain hemorrhage, which we weren't able to do anything. So he collapsed on a Sunday, and the following Tuesday he was dead. It's very ironic, really, when he was devoting his life to death and dying projects, and he was only 44 years old when he died. So yeah, it's been a very tumultuous kind of 18 months for us.
And you've decided to take over his work. Is that correct?
He asked me, actually, in 2015. We were working on a project for the Real Death Cafe, which he was hoping to set up in London. And I think during that process, it made him think about the future of, what's going to happen if I'm not here anymore. He's going to take over this enormous enterprise, if that's what it's become. And so he said to Jools, if I were to die, would you take over? And I found the email. He was still in hospital at the time, 18 months ago. So yeah, it was on his request really. My mum helps. She moderates the website now, and then his wife Donna, she runs the Twitter page, and then we have our friend Megan who runs the Facebook, and then I do the rest.
Mm-hmm. Do you think being a part of the Death Cafe and the philosophy and the understandings has helped you in mourning the loss of your brother?
I've been asked this a few times actually. I think so many people know John from a Death Cafe element. He was quite famous in the death and dying industry, but for me, it was a much more rounded and holistic. I've lost a person. I've not just lost this person who was part of Death Cafe, and so it's kind of I suppose helping to run Death Cafe and feeling like I'm kind of channeling him in a way to provide the same level. I mean, I don't think that I'm anywhere near as kind of, I don't know as much about the subject, and I'm not able to dedicate as much of my time to it as he was. But, from that aspect, yes. But I don't think that there's nothing that's ever going to prepare you and make losing somebody that you're close to okay.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if there was part of you that just wanted to be left alone to mourn your brother and not have to pick up that additional responsibility.
Yeah, I think probably in the immediate aftermath of his death, I still had people contacting me saying my Death Cafe hasn't gone online. I don't know why this has happened. And very, very kindly, Megan stepped in, who runs our Facebook page, and she was saying, listen, John's just died. The family are trying to get to. I didn't even know how to do anything on the website at that point. And this person kind of came back and said, well, that's all very well and good, but I still want my Death Cafe to go live.
Oh my goodness.
So I think it was almost like I needed that, to be honest,
Okay.
to kind of understand that this, what I'm experiencing, there are things out there that are greater and more needing than my immediate grief. And it gave me I suppose, going back to your other question, it has provided me with something to focus on. I don't think the philosophies necessarily have helped me with the grief. They've maybe helped me with my own mortality. But this doing the work that I do for Death Cafe has just kind of reinvigorated how proud I am of what John's been able to achieve, and all of the people that have been supportive. It's been so wonderful to see so many people who are so admiring of the work that he did, and still are benefiting from it.
Who have been touched by him and his work. And you also, am I right that you volunteer at hospice?
Yes, I do every fortnight.
Oh, what's that like?
It's interesting. I've worked with John since he started Death Cafe on the kind of administrative side of Death Cafe. I've never been involved in the kind of practical side of death and dying, really. I was there when John died, but that was my first experience of being around a person who was dying and who died. And I think it's interesting, and I can see how there is a segregation between the medical profession and the emotional side of death and dying, because for them it's very much a kind of day-to-day, what's the word I'm looking for, kind of
process, or?
Yeah, it's very process driven. And there was because I only go in every fortnight, I'll see different people there, and I'll ask, oh, so what happened to this person? And I'll say, oh yeah, that person passed away. But it doesn't really mean anything to them. And because I spend a little bit of time with the patients and with their families, you see these people who just want to chat. And there was a man in there who was telling me about his mother, who he hadn't imagined would be in a hospice. She'd recently been transferred, and he was crying and, really upset. And the nurses were kind of around, and, they're very lovely, but weren't providing the same, they didn't have the time, because for them it's different. They see this all of the time. People are in and out. Whereas for me, it was a kind of new thing, and it reminded me of that grief and the immediacy of having somebody in front of you dying and not understanding the process, and not really knowing what's going to happen next. Is this person going to stay there? Are they going to, it made me think about it in a very different way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And is this, how shall I say, you feel as though this experience of volunteering, this is motivated by what in you? What brings you there?
I felt like it was quite hypocritical of me to be running Death Cafe without any personal experience of death and dying, from the kind of medical side. Mm-hmm. And that, there are a lot of facilitators and people who work with Death Cafe who are in the death and dying profession. So I wanted to be able to speak to them from a place where I'm never going to understand what it's like to work in the industry day in, day out, but at least I can gain a slight understanding of it. And maybe, there are going to be some people who are in the hospice at some point who want to talk to me about death and dying, and I'm going to maybe be able to provide them with a different aspect than the medical staff. I don't know.
And has it changed your view on death and dying now that you've had, that you've actually been there, you've seen it, you're in the trenches, so to speak?
I think it made, I've been seriously ill before, and it reminded me of that which I think that you forget about when you are kind of taken out of that. When you see it vicariously, you can put yourself back in that position where you were there, and the amount of control that you lose at the end of life. And I think kind of putting in place a plan, or certainly providing yourself whilst with the consciousness that you need to be able to accept that you're dying at the time. I think that, that's what Death Cafe is all about, is, thinking at some point I'm not going to be here anymore. And, mentally preparing yourself. It's going to be maybe, there's no guarantee, but maybe it will be just that slight less amount terrifying when it happens, if you've put yourself in a position where you've not just been hiding from the fact that you are going to die.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm imagining that there have been some friendships that have been formed at the Death Cafe.
You mean between
yes.
participants?
Yes.
I don't see that much of it. And I know that certainly we've formed this really wonderful community, and there are a lot of people that know each other as a result of being hosts. But, the stuff that I see on a day-to-day basis is more kind of general reports about what people talked about, or, what were the experiences of the participants. But I don't know an enormous amount about, friendships or romances that have come out as a result of it. I hope that that's happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you talk about a vulnerable kind of conversation, which tends to bring people closer to, addressing fears and worries.
But I think that there is part of that is discussing it with strangers, because knowing that you're not necessarily going to see these people again, there's almost a safety in that.
I see. What do you hope comes of the Death Cafe, just in sort of the big picture? Where would you like to see it grow?
At the moment, the last time that I checked, we were in 56 countries. And, seeing that number grow year on year, that's always delightful. And speaking to people who are taking it into areas where it's maybe a little bit more taboo, and where the cultures are different, and we can share more experiences and kind of diversify our network. And kind of short term, translating the Death Cafe guidelines into different languages to enable that to happen. And I'm working with a few people at the moment who are translating it into Spanish and German. Somebody's asked me about translating the guidelines into Japanese. Anyone listening who would like to translate it into another language, you're more than welcome. Please come and let me know. Yeah, get in touch. It's difficult for me in a way because I work full time in addition to doing Death Cafe, and as much as I would like to develop it and put together a strategic plan, that can be quite difficult when my time and resources so limited. So I'm trying my best to move it forward, but it has to be very incremental. And John did this full time, so I think maybe it's not moving forward as quickly as it did when he was holding the reins.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. How do people typically learn about it?
We are featured in quite a lot of news articles, some of them good, some of them bad. There was a guy from Fox News, Alex Jones. Is that the right person, I think?
I wouldn't know. That's not my channel.
I'm not surprised.
And did he not appreciate Death Cafe?
He was one of the people that thought Death Cafe was a cult, and encouraging people to go out and commit suicide, which it absolutely isn't. But they say no press is bad press. So if people were encouraged to look up Death Cafe and find out that it wasn't a cult,
right,
that can only be a good thing. After John's death, he was. There were articles printed about him in the New York Times and the Washington Post and the BBC, and that was, before and after he died. So we've had a lot of media coverage. I tend to this is one of the first podcasts that I've done. I tend to kind of defer this stuff to my mum because I feel a little bit uncomfortable under the spotlight at the moment. I feel like I've got a long way to go before I know anywhere near enough to represent Death Cafe effectively. So I'm hoping people bear with me.
Well, you're doing just fine. So did Fox actually interview you, or they just discovered you and made their own assumptions?
No, I think they just saw the words Death Cafe and then decided to create a story about it. I believe that's common practice. Not that I'm critiquing Fox. I know nothing about them really. I just know what they said about Death Cafe, which was hilarious.
So you're getting this publicity, and that's wonderful. But do physicians or healthcare people know about you, or is that just kind of two separate worlds?
No, we actually have been contacted. There's been an article in Palliative Care magazine over in the UK recently. In fact, it may have been just at the end of last year or early this year that it was released. Where there was a group of medical professionals who got together and talked about death and dying in a Death Cafe environment. And it's becoming more commonplace actually for them to be held within medical professions because, we think that our doctors and nurses have been given exposure in terms of how to treat people and speak to patients and their families about death and dying, but it turns out that it's still very, for want of a better word, medicalized. They're not necessarily talking about the emotional side of things, and it's very kind of hardline and pragmatic. And I'm sure there are many people out there who have kind of got that right balance between medical and emotional. But I think the environment that's being created by people in the medical profession who are facilitating death cafes for this, this network, is really important in changing the language and palliative care in general.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's been my experience too. I've heard physicians talk about it's a real conflict for them because, at what cost do we keep the body alive? And
Hmm.
what's the value of life? What's the quality of life? And if some of this stuff hasn't been sorted out, you're in the hospital room and everybody is emotional. It's the worst possible time to make decisions
Hmm.
if it hasn't been talked about previously.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a medical doctor who did a TED talk, and I'm trying to remember the name of his institution, but I think he's located in Brazil. And there was a network of Latin American countries that were all holding it. I think they called it the Death Cafe Massive or something like that. So on this particular date, there were death cafes held all across these countries at exactly the same time. And his TED talk speaks about the fact that, you have this kind of white coat syndrome, and, you've put all of this trust and faith into your doctor. And there needs to be a massive movement to help people to understand, physicians and otherwise, to help them understand how better to communicate with their patients and prepare them for these sorts of decisions.
And of course, more and more relevant since the entire world is aging.
Mm.
And this is, going to become much more of an issue for all of us as we're, getting older. And it's something that has to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, yes. Our aging population is growing enormously.
Mhm. Is there anything else you'd like to say to our listeners about Death Cafe and how being a participant might be beneficial for them?
Yeah, I think that, even if you feel like you may be a shy person and you don't want to necessarily speak to a wide group of people, you should go find a death cafe near you and participate as little or as much as you want. There are principles that we won't lead anybody to any agenda or course of action. It's just a safe space to discuss anything that you want to in terms of death or dying. There'll be no promotion of any products.
Mm-hmm.
We just want to give people this safe space.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find out where to go to your nearest death cafe by visiting our website, which is deathcafe.com.
That was my next question, deathcafe.com. And that is for people also in the States?
Yes, yeah,
That's
it's
for
one website for
everyone.
everyone. Yeah, John built it so that it's got every country listed that we have ever had death cafes in. And we've got a nice map there so you can see which ones are closest to you.
And that's lovely. And if somebody wants to host their own death cafe, they
Yeah,
would be able to find out how on deathcafe.com.
yeah, it's actually deathcafe.com/how. And
Oh, okay.
all of our guidelines are written there, and they're written in really easy language, and I think they're in there in French as well.
That's wonderful. Jules, I so appreciate you taking the time. I know you're very busy. You have your full-time job, you have your volunteer job. You're trying to pick up the reins here, and I just really appreciate you sharing this with us. I think our listeners will really appreciate this and benefit from it, and I'm looking forward to putting it up on the podcast.
No, I'm really grateful for you having me, and thank you for bearing with me whilst whilst I try to stumble through what I'm doing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on Zestful Aging. If you like the podcast, please share with some of your friends. I love to hear from my listeners. Send me an email at nicolechristina.com. And please consider becoming a patron of the show. You will get access to exclusive bonuses, and you will be part of the Zestful Aging community. Keep us going strong. Go to patreon.com/zestfulaging. See you next time for another episode of Zestful Aging.